Hello and welcome to Sri Lanka 99.94 Cricket Every Day. I'm Mark Machado from the Murali End and I'm joined as always by Estelle Devon from the Papare. Sri Lanka 99.94 is your new home for Sri Lanka content. We're dropping into your podcast feed on YouTube or the 99.94 app several times every week. So please do rate, review, subscribe, tell all your friends that Sri Lanka 99.94 is here. Thanks for joining Cricket's Conversation. Estelle, we're talking about Sri Lanka spinner Maheesh Theekshana today and his rise to the top of the cricketing ladder because it has been absolutely rapid. At the point of recording this, it's only a few days after Sri Lanka have ended their run in the T20 World Cup, and I declared him as my player of the tournament for Sri Lanka. He started his career at he came to prominence in Sri Lanka playing schoolboy cricket at St Benedict's College in Colombo, and he's not only risen and become a mainstay in the Sri Lanka side, but he's also one of the few Sri Lankan players who's got an IPL contract and is pretty much playing in almost every franchise or in every major franchise around the world at the moment. Estelle, when did you first hear about Maheesh Theekshana?
Yeah, I got to say it was the LPL. I think he really kind of shot into the spotlight in that first season for Jaffna, where he was kind of the unknown quantity in that bowling attack, which also had Hasaranga. That's the first time I got to see him. He'd, of course, been playing for Army SC before that. And like you mentioned, schoolboy cricket. I guess coming from St. Benedict's College, I don't think there was too much attention on him at that point because it's not a very big, cricketing school anymore. They don't have a big match. So, that kind of attention isn't on St. Benedict's College. But he was also briefly involved in like the under-19 setup. So he was kind of there and thereabouts. But definitely it was the first season of the LPL where a lot of people started talking about him.
Yeah, that's where I first came across him. That Jaffna team he was part of was actually quite a special side, right? The story I heard was that he was somebody who, people were talking about as a schoolboy cricketer. Did he win schoolboy cricketer of the year? He was definitely in the running for it, wasn't he?
I don't think he won, no.
Oh, okay. And as you say, St Benedict's College, which I should also say is a school close to my heart because I went to St Benedict's in Ealing, and my school in London does a annual tour to Sri Lanka, even though my school is nowhere near as good as any Sri Lankan schools at cricket, and they do go and visit them. And obviously, both schools are run by monks, so I like to think that I have some understanding of what his early life might have been, though I should actually say that my school in London now actually isn't run by monks anymore. But, the ethos is quite the same. And, it's the story I heard was that at school he was, people were talking about him and people were excited about him, but people weren't really sure whether or not that would translate. That obviously Sri Lankan schoolboy cricket is awash with spinners who can get wickets, but that doesn't necessarily mean that when they step up and have to play against professionals or in the first class setup that they'll necessarily be successful. But he was, someone took a chance on him. The story I heard was that it was Tissera Pereira who pitched for it, and it really paid off for that Jaffna side, right? And they've in the two iterations of the Lanka Premier League that we've had, they've been the dominant side, and he's been a key part of that, right?
Yeah, funny story. I spoke to him just before the World Cup. And he was telling me how he came into St. Benedict's College in 2015 as more of a batsman, which is weird. I mean, to think about now. And then turned to spin bowling, got into the under-19 side, but unfortunately, because of fitness, missed out on the under-19 World Cup, Asia Cup, a couple of tours. So was very much put off by that. But according to him, in that last occasion where he was kind of, his name was cut off because he hadn't met the fitness standards by a couple of points, according to him. He had made up his mind that he's going to play international cricket before any of those players in that lineup. And, 2 years later, he's played all three formats for Sri Lanka. So, like, a pretty incredible story, I think. And Tisara Pereira has played a pivotal role in it, first by getting him into Army SC. I think he was at Coles Cricket Club before that. So Tisara got him into Army, and then I think the whole, focus on fitness really helped him. He got to play with a lot of, international players. Dinesh Chandimal, Tisara Pereira, Siko K. Prasanna all represent Army Sports Club, of course. And also got to train under Ajantha Mendis, who, like him, was a very similar type of bowler during his heyday. So Pereira, I would say, had a massive influence. He then also got him into the Jaffna side when, according to Mahesh, I think he was picked as like a supplementary player in the first season. So he wasn't even in one of the main squads. He was just one of those, fringe players that SLC kind of had their eyes on. And on Pereira's kind of insistence, they managed to draft him in as an emerging player for Jaffna. And, as they say, rest is history. He's gone on from strength to strength. And now, he's one of the first names you pick in that Sri Lanka lineup, whether it's ODI or T20 cricket. So it's been an incredible, 2-3 years. It hasn't even been that long since he made his debut for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, well, we're recording this in November 2022, and he only made his debut for Sri Lanka in September 2021. It's, as you say, it's not been that long. He feels like he's a mainstay of the side now. He feels like he's a fixture in it. If you're going off to Australia and you're definitely picking him and alongside another spinner, alongside Hasaranga, then he's basically at this point undroppable. And his stats back it up, right? Because his economy rate is really good in international cricket. We need to talk a bit about, though, Army Sports Club, because he hasn't been involved in anything controversial and definitely nothing compared to what other Sri Lankan players have been involved in that are controversial. But it was actually quite a big statement when he got signed by the Super Kings, because they very rarely have Sri Lankan players, had a long period of not having any Sri Lankan players. And to top it all off, what was, I want to say, upsetting some of the Super Kings fans was that he is a member of the Sri Lankan Army. He joined as a private, and he recently got made a sergeant after his performance in the Asia Cup. I think we need to clarify that he is very, very, very unlikely to ever see any active service, and that actually a lot of sportsmen and women in Sri Lanka join the Army or Navy or Air Force in order to further their sporting ambitions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly in the last couple of years, Army Sports Club have been kind of recruiting a lot of players for their cricket sides, the women's and the men's teams. In the past, only kind of, those really training to be in the Army would be allowed to play for Army Sports Club, but things have changed a little bit. They've managed to kind of get a few big names in, and as a result, have seen some success in the cricket scene. Theekshana, we spoke about this whole thing with CSK supporters. Of course, Tamil Nadu, a lot of people had a problem with Theekshana being drafted, but one thing he said was Super Kings owners were very kind of direct with him and told him not to worry, that things would work out, and they didn't. At the end of the day, once he started performing, I don't think anyone had any objections to him being in that CSK squad. And now he's also managed to pick up a deal with the kind of the partner team in the South African League as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make any political statements about something I don't really have a good enough understanding of or don't have any lived experience of. But at 22, he was how old when when the war ended? So, and hopefully it's all part of a kind of a healing process somewhere down the line. I might regret those words, I don't know. Should we take a quick break? And when we come back, should we talk about a little bit more about his career, what he's done so far and where it might end up?
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
So Estelle, what I really love seeing when I watch Sri Lanka play cricket is the Hawkeye. It's not the Hawkeye simulation, but Theekshana doing his Hawkeye impression whenever he gets a wicket.
I think it's Arrow, isn't it?
Yeah, he said Harrow, but I'm a big fan of Marvel, so I'm just going to say it's Hawkeye. I'm also going to throw in, because I was thinking of, stuff you could do with it, content stuff. Whenever Hasaranga gets a wicket, he does that thing with his hands where he's like got two phones up. I have no idea. To me, that looks like Ant-Man. Is he doing an Ant-Man impression there? I don't know.
No, wasn't it something to do with Neymar? I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, it is. Oh, so I don't watch that Farmers League, so I wouldn't know what he's up to in France. No, he did say. I don't know why they keep. I think Hasaranga doing it for me is more iconic, right? And obviously, Theekshana's arrows are brilliant. I absolutely love it. I've noticed, particularly around this World Cup, they've put him up to speak a few times after the press conference, which I'm always surprised about, because at 22, he's one of the younger members of the squad. You would have thought maybe older players might be the ones who end up doing it. Traditionally, you normally send out somebody who's a bit more experienced with these things. I wonder if it's because his place in the side isn't up for question. But I also wonder if it's an indication of his maturity around the game and the way he thinks about things, that's why, somebody at SLC thinks he's a good person to speak to. You said you've met him. What's he like to talk to? What's he like in person?
Yeah, he seems like a really nice guy. Like you mentioned, I think it's a mix of both things. It does seem a lot more mature for the usual 22-year-old you come across. Does also have a good head on his shoulders. I think you feel like we spoke about, like he's been in international cricket for just over a year, but you don't often see captains having to walk up to him and tell him what to do, or you don't see that very often, which is it's almost like even in their heads, this guy has been there, he's done that, he's got the experience, he knows what he's doing, he's got control of what he's doing. It's kind of, I would say, unusual trait, and I think we often forget how young Theekshana actually is. I mean, Sri Lanka team as a whole is pretty young. There are a lot of youngsters in the side, but Theekshana is not the youngest. And again, there seems to be, you questioned his place in the side, or whether they might leave him out for the extra pace bowler. But hardly ever, I think, since making his debut, I don't think there's ever been a realistic situation where Sri Lanka were considering kind of leaving him out. So I think overall, he does seem like the type of guy who is level-headed, who's not going to say too much. I think SLC also like that, where it's not a player who might get emotional and say too many things at a press conference. But yeah, he's kind of struck that balance that they'd like, I think.
I like to think two things. Firstly, I like to think that maybe my comments were I don't know if he watches this. If you're listening, Maheesh, I do follow you on Instagram. You don't follow me back, that's fine. But maybe you see my comments and maybe they spurned you on to getting player of the tournament from awarded by me. So, I was happy. The other thing I will say is I do think possibly when they go to, if they, at some point they will tour England, and I think there is some pitches over here where I think you'd be hard pressed to play two spinners. You might do it in T20, so maybe he's just never ever going to get dropped. And that said, actually, if you look at this economy, definitely after this World Cup, you're like, we've got him down as the second choice spinner. Economically, that's just not true, is it? Though Hasaranga's taking more wickets, you could argue Hasaranga tends to bowl slightly later and buys his wickets. And I felt this time, this tournament, Theekshana was the one they were throwing the ball to when they didn't really know what to do, maybe. They're both absolutely brilliant, Estelle, and I love them both equally. And I kind of feel this is unfair. Like, you're making me pick between the two of them.
We all know that when you say I love them both equally, you don't really mean that.
No, but I do mean that. Look, I've told you, I feel this closeness to him because we went to the same kind of family of schools. I've spent a lot of time around Catena in Colombo. I too would have failed fitness tests if I had to do them when I was at any time in my life. So there is a closeness between us, I think. He doesn't know who I am, obviously. You talk about Hasaranga, isn't it? Like, personality-wise, they couldn't be more different, really, from what you see.
And I think that's what makes the pair of them so successful. I think we mentioned it in the previous episode as well. The fact that they are so different and they are playing such different roles, it really works in their favor. Yeah,
I think so too. You might be able to hear my computer rumbling. Don't tell Jared, but I accidentally left my microphone at home, if you can hear that, and my computer is not well, mainly because I'm listening to or recording podcasts almost day and night on this, so it needs a little break. So if you can do, sorry, apologies for that. It won't happen again, I promise. We're talking about Maheesh Theekshana on Sri Lanka 99.94. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about what the future might hold for him.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Estelle, we kind of talked about his early career. We talked about him working in tandem with Hasaranga. He's very young. He's 22. There's a lot of comparisons with his mentor, Ajantha Mendis, who kind of burst into the scene, took a lot of wickets very early, and then kind of tailed off a bit as he got a little bit found out. They've got very similar actions. I was doing some research on Theekshana yesterday, and I reckon he's got, is it 7 different balls? Which is quite a lot when you consider he's only been playing international cricket for just over a year. I think he could end up playing international cricket for the next kind of 15 years if he can avoid injury, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it all comes down to mindset as well. Like, if you are going to depend on mystery, then I don't think you're going to have a very long career. But I don't think he does, actually. His strength is basically, his discipline in line and length. The way he's able to vary his pace, his length, his lines, etc. And the kind of role he's been given with Sri Lanka cricket, that's his strength. It's not really, sure, there are times when players aren't reading what's coming out of his hand, but I don't think he's dependent on that per se. If you look at his record, he's getting wickets off carom ball, sure, he's getting, off spinners to turn, whatever. But his main strength is that, wicket to wicket kind of line and length, just not giving the batter enough room to kind of maneuver him around. And I think that's where he's seen success. As you mentioned, Ajantha Mendis Like he burned so bright early on and just fizzled out. Um, which in itself, that's a great career too, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was great when he was.
It's so obviously the other cricket culture I'm most involved in is in the UK, and in that time England have had some good spinners and some not some good spinners, and Sri Lanka have had two of the all-time greatest spinners in Murali and Ranganaherath, and then Ajanta Mendis is kind of the third one after the off the rank, as it were, I think, in the last kind of 20 years or so. And actually, Ajanta Mendis' career is absolutely superb. The only kind of thing is it lives slightly in the shadow of these other two, like, absolute gods of spin bowling, right? But if Ajanta Mendis had played for almost any other country in the world, maybe not India or Pakistan, he would have been, he'd be in their all-time greats, and he would have ended up playing a lot more cricket and probably getting a lot more wickets just from the sheer time on the pitch. He arguably just came, emerged at slightly the wrong time, possibly.
Yeah, and for Theekshana, I think maybe a better career to kind of emulate would be of Sunil Narayan. He is also kind of classified as a mystery spinner, but what's it been like a decade or more now that he's been consistently troubling the batters. Still, we do see him when we do see him play franchise cricket. He's still able to kind of bamboozle batters. So if there's anyone he wants to emulate, I think he would want to have an eye on someone like Narayan. But at the moment, I think he's doing well enough. It's all about kind of staying uh, just a little bit ahead of the game, not getting caught up in all the mystery per se, because that's going to fade away with the analytics people have now. You've got footage, slow motion footage of which way the ball is turning and where the seam is and all that, right? So you're never going to survive long if you're going to depend on that kind of thing. But right now, I think he's on the right path. I don't think he's also dependent on that kind of thing. He's focused more on like keeping things simple, uh, keeping the right lines and lengths, and that's what has brought him success so far.
And I think the other key part of that is that he's got picked up by CSK so early in his career. And I think part of that was, I think they've identified him and be like, this is something we can mould. This is something we can work with for a decade or more.
Yeah, actually, I think even before CSK, the fact that he was picked in T10 cricket as a spinner, that's also massive. I think that's played a massive role in him kind of developing as a bowler. Because, I mean, if you think T20 is frantic, like T10 cricket is crazy, right?
Yeah.
But he was able to hold his own there as well. So I think that's also played a role in him kind of maturing into the type of bowler he is now.
And he got that T10 franchise deal before he'd even played international cricket.
Yes.
So clearly people in the know, who know much more about cricket than I do, not quite as much as Estelle though, and were able to identify him pretty early on and be like, we need to get this guy in and have a look and see what he can do. So I think the future is bright for him. And Estelle, as you've been at the forefront of breaking the news about his batting exploits as well. I'm looking forward to his first big knock even for Sri Lanka, because as you said, as a schoolboy, he was an all-rounder, right? So at some point,
actually,
he might start
said
getting it right.
opening batter, so I'm not sure whether he even bowled at that point. He said he used to open the batting.
I think he did bowl, because there's a great website in Sri Lanka called the Papare that have highlights of him taking wickets at school on YouTube. You should go check those out. Estelle, I think that's pretty much everything we've got to say about
We've
him.
got to give a shout out to Theekshana's grandma. According to him, his biggest supporter and like his kind of life coach, the one who's kept him in the game. I think, obviously, as a 17, 18-year-old not getting picked to national squads because of your fitness level or your weight or your body couldn't have felt good. According to him, he was looking at even moving on from Sri Lanka, trying to move to Australia and get some get into some cricket there. but it was his grandma who kind of convinced him to stay, at least give it a shot for a couple more years. You're still young. And, thanks to her, we now have a, top 10 in the ICC T20I rankings, right?
Yeah, she's a hero of Sri Lankan cricket. And we should probably do a deep dive into her at some point, and maybe we will.
Well, I tried to get some information, not forthcoming.
Oh dear. Right, let's leave it there. Thank you for listening to Sri Lanka 99.94, where we speak cricket every day. Please do rate, review, subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast. You can download the 99.94 app, and you can also follow us on Twitter. I'm at Mark Machado, and Estelle is at Estelle_Vasude1, as in the number one. Never miss out. Join our 24/7 conversation on social media and follow us at 9994DM. Cricket every day, your way.